Welcome to this video, guys. Today I'm joined with,
Jacob Graham.
and we're gonna go over some exercise science, a little bit of our journey as personal trainers, coaches. I hope you sit back, relax, and learn something here.
Hopefully you can resonate with some of the things that we're going to talk about. And I recommend you have something to either write in or, at the end of the day, it's what's caught, not taught. So just
What's
whatever,
caught, not taught.
yeah, whatever you can retain. That's what we're here to do, is just share everything that we've learned on our journey and just give it all the way to you guys, and then hopefully help you in some way.
Yeah. You know what I say? I say, note takers are history makers.
Okay.
Note takers are history
like
makers. So get out the notes, take some notes, or just listen in, refer back to this video when you need. First question I have for you, Jacob, is tell them about how we met, from your perspective, how we met and how we connected, and kind of lead us up to where we are today.
Evan and I met when we were both big newbies. Okay, we both started at Crunch, just as corporate trainers in 2021. He started in January, I started in February. And we just connected pretty early because it was pretty apparent that we both really cared. We weren't just clocking in and clocking out. Like, we truly cared about helping others. And yeah, we both just spent about a year at Crunch and poured our all into it. And yeah, learned a lot along the way, made a lot of failures, but always self-corrected. And then we ended up actually working together independently for some time. And we both had the long-term vision of being online coaches and helping people at a bigger scale. And we're both just kind of following through on that now. So clicked early and really stayed persistent. And yeah, leads us to today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had lots of ups and downs, got to see each other grow and just develop personally in our journeys, personal development, as well as in our fitness journey. And I think more than anything in our coaching journey. We definitely bond over, the different coaching styles that we thought were the best, and evolved into how we coach now. And just, Jacob was an amazing trainer, man. I just always learned so much from Jacob, and whether it was his sales, his prospecting, his intentional training, I always learned a lot from Jacob. We bounced ideas all the time. I know it was always super competitive between the two of us. Because, I hit the ground running. I was like the top trainer by the time you got hired the next month. And then all of a sudden, Jacob's the top trainer that month. So we just were constantly trying to one-up each other with how many clients we could get, and just how well we could perform on our clients and stuff. So, man, it was great to push each other and just watch each other grow. Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because we were just talking how when we started as coaches, our whole philosophy towards helping people was so much different.
Yeah.
Because when you think of oh, what's a personal trainer? You think of some guy with a whistle and he's in your ear and he's pushing you like a football coach. Yeah. Almost. And when we started at Crunch, that's how our managers wanted us to train. They're like, oh, hit workouts are our bread and butter. We're just gonna smoke people. They should have to limp out of the gym. If they didn't limp out of the gym, you didn't do it right.
Yeah.
I was just telling him, one of my first clients, Felicia Keith, I had her on the sled back and forth. I was doing her a service, and in hindsight, it's crazy how our coaching has evolved to really caring about the future of our clients and wanting to help them approach the gym from a lens of sustainability, and actually teaching them to love
longevity.
Yeah, teaching them to love it and learn how to actually choose growth as a way of life and not feel like the gym has to be a chore. So it's just crazy how our whole philosophy towards training has kind of evolved over the years, but we actually ended up in the exact same place.
So what do you think are the biggest mistakes that we maybe made, or you see all the time in the fitness community?
First, it's just getting an idea on what somebody's goal is. Okay, this is something that we connect on a lot. But the more people you see, you realize 99% of people's goal is, hey, you know what? I just want to look better, feel better, be healthier, just feel like the gym can be a piece of my life that fits in well, rather than something that I have to dread. So that's something that, hit me really early is, hey, how can I create an environment with my coaching style and my program that actually suits that goal rather than approaching my training as a way of just like focusing on the short term or really trying to push somebody with the hardest workout they possibly can right now. So that's like one of the biggest mistakes I've seen with people is just getting in that mindset of like, hey, I only had a good workout if I'm aching, if like my body's burning. I think that's a big misconception, is that, you really don't need to feel like you're torturing yourself to actually make the most out of a workout. It's actually the exact opposite of that.
I totally agree. Let's say like everything you just said would be considered maybe like not finding a sustainable approach, right? So finding a sustainable approach that aligns with your goals is what you should do. But a lot of the time you find people overtraining, under recovery, going all out, balls to the walls, limping out of the gym, right? So if that was mistake number one and we had to come up with 5 mistakes, mistake number 1 is not finding a sustainable approach. What would be some other ones?
I think another mistake I see is just the actual quality of people's workouts. Like, what movements are they doing? Like, are they doing movements that are in alignment with their goals? It's really easy to look around the gym and just kind of see what other people are doing and maybe try to emulate them. And you spend a lot of time doing something that isn't actually suited for you or something that you might not even look forward to. And then, all that time that you spend on that, it's time that could have been better spent otherwise. So that's another mistake I see is just the exercise selection, rest time. Just when you go in and just kind of copy, it's really hard to find something that is going to be best suited towards you, or that could actually be more optimally suited towards you had you actually sought help and structure early on, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. So if we had to boil everything down to what you just said, would be number 2 mistake would be not following a structured routine for your goals.
Yeah.
Right. That's really good. Any other big ones that pop out to you?
Yeah, I mean, just when I started, I used to just go on Google and look in just like random exercises or random workouts. So I used to follow the Thor workout, right? And that's a perfect example of like that workout. In hindsight, there was like literally movements that I totally neglected just because I just decided to choose a random program that I found online. Like I told you, I never did a row in the sagittal plane for years.
Yeah.
And then even when I became a coach, I still wasn't doing any of those rows. I was always doing lat pull downs or pull ups. And then it took me 2 years and I finally had to realize like, hey, why are my lats not growing? And everything else was like, why are my shoulders so hunched, right? And then I had to rewind and go backwards to move forward. So, that's why I really wish that I actually sought some professional guidance early on, because I could have skipped a lot of those failures. It would have just saved me a lot of time.
Okay, yeah. I think if I had to boil that down, number 3 would be seeking professional help or seeking professional guidance, not just copying those around you or just doing somebody else's workout for somebody else's goals, right? So we touched on sustainability, structure, and seeking professional guidance or professional help. Is there any other big mistakes that you see? Maybe one more that you can think of?
For somebody that's trying to be healthy, or are we talking about somebody that's specifically trying to build muscle?
Fitness community, everything. What are some of the big mistakes? I know I have one more personally.
Yeah, go for it.
I'd maybe touch on ego lifting. Sometimes, a lot of the time, you see people go in and like, oh, I have to hit 225 on bench, or I have to hit 315 on squat, or 405 for deadlift, or whatever it is, right? Like chasing after these numbers and completely neglecting the damage that they're doing to their body and just not holding proper form and just chasing after a goal that probably doesn't even align with their true intentions. Like you said, you want to be happy, you want to be healthy, you want the gym to make your life better instead of making your gym all, or making your life all about the gym and all about the numbers and how much can you bench, how much can you deadlift, how much can you back squat, all of these ego lifting things, I think is a huge mistake that you see. And it's hard. It's hard with social media when there's 18-year-olds hopping on steroids, hitting these heavy lifts, and you're like, oh, I want to be like him, or I want to be like that, when in reality, their life kind of sucks, right? Like, they're relying on substances, they're relying on, you know, social validation to do things that aren't sustainable, you know, doesn't really make them happy and healthy, but they can portray this image of success, right? Like, you think what success is. So I'd touch on that as a big mistake that I see, and just like the fitness community can be very influential in that direction.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially with social media. You know, it's really easy to see somebody's highlights and almost let that discourage you. And especially if, you know what I mean? So that's the unique part about the gym. It's the only kind of sport where you're not actually competing against anybody except yourself. So I've been there though. Like, there's so many people around you working out, and there's so many things that you see on social media. It can be hard not to think about others, but like, the more that I just connect with, hey, look at the progress that I've made, and just trying to get a little bit better every single time. That's why I love, like, the idea of progressive overload, and you can literally objectively see yourself improving on your past self. It's just a lot more gratifying knowing, hey, I'm getting a little bit better than I used to be, rather than I'm getting a little bit better than somebody else. And that's why I love the gym, because that kind of mirrors other themes in life, because that's what life really is trying to grow and be better versions of ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think that boils down to, like, that last point, you know, mistake could be making it, instead of you versus everyone else, is you versus you, right? Like, deleting the comparison aspect in the gym, which can be challenging as somebody that's new. But yeah, that's great. I love that as well. You know, the gym is all about you versus you, not you versus everybody else. I think it's great to have, you know, that competitive nature and have people that are building you up and keeping you accountable, but like, you can't expect for you to do what I'm doing and for me to do what you're doing all the time, and like harping yourself on that comparison. So yeah, I really like that. So I think we should transition into some other exercise science stuff, but real quick, I want to recap everything that we just talked about there. So like, number one was finding a sustainable approach. Number two was following a structured workout routine. Number three was seeking professional guidance. Number four was avoiding ego lifting. And number five was making sure it's you versus you and getting rid of comparison.
I love that. Yeah, super good.
I think those are solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good. But yeah, let's get into some exercise science stuff.
Dope.
I know Jacob Graham, exercise science guru. He'll definitely be spitting some knowledge here. Let's start with the two main terms that everyone hears. You can break it down one at a time, but I want to know more about hypertrophy, and I want to know more about progressive overload, and how to take these things and do them properly.
Yeah. So really, hypertrophy is muscle growth.
Yep.
Okay. So what I found is, you know, hearing that goal of, hey, I want to look better, I want to feel better, right? When I hear that, I'm thinking hypertrophy, I'm thinking good nutrition, okay, and I'm thinking having some kind of sustainable cardio habit, okay. And the reason why I think that way is because, you know, what your intention is when you're in the gym is you're training to develop muscle, right? So going in and doing powerlifting type of movements, okay, that's not necessarily going to be in alignment with just that goal of, hey, I'm in here trying to train muscle. So just knowing that, hey, the more I can learn what is hypertrophy, what is building muscle, how do I do that optimally? What's actually going on in my body physiologically that I can apply that's going to help me do that? You're basically just doing your weightlifting part of those pillars to the best that you possibly can, the most efficient and effective way that you possibly can. So that's why I'm so passionate about hypertrophy, because I think that's what most people really, their goal is to do in the gym, is to, hey, when I'm in here to train and lift weights, what I'm really saying is I'm in here to develop muscle the best way that I can. And that's what I've been on a journey to try to master and try to learn as much as I can about. That ties in perfectly to progressive overload, because as I've been studying more and more, right, I mentioned I was really in that camp of trying to do more, okay? And the more advanced I got, I was trying to do more. And you always hear like, hey, to build muscle, I gotta break down the muscle so I can build it back bigger, okay? And when you think in that lens, you can really get caught up in not prioritizing progressive overload, okay? Because you're saying, you know what, I'm just gonna go into the gym and break my muscles down any means necessary. You're doing supersets, you're doing drop sets, right? And it feels good. It feels like a challenge, right? You think you're getting so much out of that because it burns and it hurts, and you feel like, man, I did something challenging. It feels accomplishing, right? But really, the best way to make the most out of hypertrophy is a few different factors, but most importantly, progressive overload.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's a good overview. If you had to get into the specifics, how does someone effectively achieve hypertrophy, and how does someone effectively achieve progressive overload? Like, if I was your client and you were telling me like the specifics of, hey, this is how you're gonna achieve hypertrophy and how you're gonna achieve progressive overload in your workout routine, what would you suggest?
Shifting from the chasing to the chasing the burn, you need to know, okay, if that's not what creates hypertrophy, then what does? Okay, and what I learned is a couple things. Okay, one is called mechanical tension. Okay, so mechanical tension, think of like that pulling force in the last few reps before failure on a set. All right, so if I'm doing a curl and towards the end, like I'm giving my best, and you feel that pulling force, like you're trying your hardest, but it's kind of moving slow on its own, and you feel that involuntary slowing, and you feel that pull. Okay, that's what we're shooting for when it comes to hypertrophy. Okay, we're shooting for mechanical tension. Okay, and the number two is high motor unit recruitment. Okay, motor unit recruitment is essentially what we achieve to activate as many muscle fibers in the muscle as we possibly can. Okay, so going back to that same example of the bicep curl, okay, if you remember that the bicep is not just one solid muscle, right? It's made up of hundreds of thousands of muscle fibers. Okay, and the whole point is we want to be able to achieve that mechanical tension on as many of those muscle fibers as possible. And as we're progressing through our fitness journey, we very slowly want to be able to gain access to more and more of those muscle fibers. Okay, so the best way to activate those muscle fibers is through progressive overload. And what's happening physiologically is every time you do that movement, you're creating an electrical signal in the central motor command, which is a part of your brain. Okay, and depending on how hard that movement is, the size of that signal is going to change. Okay, if I'm doing something really easy, I'm just curling 5 pounds and it doesn't require a lot of effort, it's a very small signal in your brain. Okay, and that small signal is only going to recruit low threshold motor units. Okay, and low threshold motor units only activate a few of those muscle fibers. Right? It's not going to activate most of those muscle fibers. Okay, so that's why when we're doing light weight, we're not making any progress, because we're just activating those muscle fibers that we've trained over and over and over. Okay, so when you understand that, hey, if I want to progress and create hypertrophy, right, I need to be able to create a larger signal, one that muscle hasn't experienced before. That way I can reach a new height, a new limit. Okay, and that's what happens when we do a really heavy weight that we've never touched before. Right, it's a little bit heavier than we did last time, right? We're going for a new record. You create a little bit larger signal, which then recruits high threshold motor units, okay, which then is going to activate more muscle fibers, and then we can mechanically load those muscle fibers, right, by training with those gritty, intentional reps towards the end of the set, and that's how we actually make gains and create hypertrophy. So it's a little deep, it can be a little hard to digest, but conceptually that's kind of what's going on in your body, and that really helps us like realize how important progressive overload is, because the only way we're going to be able to slowly gain access to more muscle fibers and create hypertrophy on more muscle fibers is by very slowly increasing the weight. Okay, it's not by doing more. Okay, that's not going to help us reach access to new muscle fibers. Okay, it's by increasing the weight so we can increase the size of the signal so we can recruit high threshold motor units, activate more muscle fibers, and then create new hypertrophy.
Yeah, I love that. I love that breakdown. That's really in depth. That's really detailed. That was great. I hope somebody can break that down, listen to it a couple times maybe, and really start to understand that.
Yeah.
That's some really good stuff there. So what I'm hearing you're saying is you got to make sure that you're going heavy enough to recruit as many muscle fibers as possible. You need to make sure that you're at a very high intensity. You have to make sure that within each workout, you're striving for a new personal record. But let's get specific on what do you mean by new personal record with each workout, right? So with progressive overload, if we're getting to more of a specific, hey, this is what you should do in the gym, right? Not like the science breakdown behind it. Am I increasing my volume? Am I increasing my frequency? Am I increasing my weight, my reps, my sets? Like, what is the most important thing to progress? You know, those are a lot of factors, right? So what factors am I keeping the same? And what factors am I increasing in order to hit hypertrophy and progressive overload?
In order to progressively overload in the most optimal way that we can, we want to try to standardize as many variables as we can and just manipulate one. Okay, because if you're changing multiple things at the same time, right? You're changing, 1 week you're going 6 times to the gym, 1 week you're going 3 times to the gym, right?
So frequency, if you're changing your frequency all the time, that's a no-go.
Right.
What other variables are there?
If you're changing your volume all the time, like one time I'm doing 10 exercises in the gym, the next time I'm doing 3, right?
Or if you do 6 sets one day and then the next day you do 3 sets with the drop set and then, okay, I'm going to do supersets, right? So you want to keep your volume relatively the same. So frequency and volume. What else?
And then you also just mentioned like trying to eliminate the intensifiers. Okay? Like unless you only have 20, 30 minutes to go into the gym, you shouldn't have to do supersets at all. Like you're just going to that's just getting less out of each set than you otherwise would be able to if you rested in between.
For muscle building, for hypertrophy.
Yeah, for hypertrophy.
Yep.
So like you're trying to standardize that our rest time, right? Not just throwing in the supersets and the drop sets and creating that cardiovascular effect and that fatigue effect that is just going to impede on our ability to set records and progressively overload.
Okay, so you're keeping the frequency the same, you're keeping the volume the same. Is that the only things I'm keeping the same, and what am I adjusting?
Also, we're keeping exercise selection.
Okay, so good. Structure is the same, exercise selection is the same, frequency is the same, the number of times you're going to the gym per week, and your volume should be relatively the same. So I have 3 standardized factors, variables. What variables am I changing to see?
Ideally, I'm increasing the weight. Okay, the whole point of hypertrophy and progressive overload is we're trying to get stronger over time. Okay, so for example, if today I can only do 100 pounds for 6 reps on a chest press and I'm getting really close to failure, I have those gritty reps, right? Next time I'm going to see if I can go for 105. Okay, now I'm doing 105, maybe I get 4, right? And then when I'm at that point, then I can increase the number of reps as well. So like going from 105 for 4 reps to then the next week 105 for 5 reps. That would be an example of progressive overload. But what isn't an example of progressive overload is, hey, I did 3 sets of 100 this time. Next week I'm going to go for 4 sets of 100. I did more. That means I made progress. No. Okay, so it's about increasing our strength.
So that would be an example of increasing your volume, right? Which would be a different factor, right? So you want to keep those factors the same. You want to increase your weight.
Your weight.
So what about with reps? Am I increasing my reps? Am I not increasing my reps? I have an opinion. I want to hear yours.
It's going to be impractical to think that you're just going to go in and be able to bump up 5 pounds every single week.
Not sustainable.
Okay, yeah, it's not at all. Maybe when you're a newbie, you're going to see that. But you're going to get to a certain point where you're going to be really freaking proud of yourself for going up by 1 rep on a movement. Okay? So it's really those two things. It's increasing the weight or the reps, but then there's a fine line because it's not, if I'm doing 100 pounds for 5, I'm not trying to eventually build my way up to doing 100 pounds for 15.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's sticking in that rep range, but then just trying to increase the weight and get stronger over time.
That's good. So the way I like to look at it, we talked about what we're keeping the same, right? But we're changing those two variables. We're changing weight and we're changing reps. So you want to stick to a specific rep range. I love to stick to about 6 to 10. I know you like to stick to about 4 to 8.
Yeah.
And using a weight until you get to the top of that rep range. So like once Jacob gets 100 pounds for 8 reps, okay, he's going to go to 105 and he's going to work his way through 4 one week, 5 the next week, 6 the next week. And finally, when he gets that 105 to 8 reps, right, within that rep range, then you're going to increase that weight. All right, so had a little malfunction with the cameras. So hopefully we didn't lose anything there too crazy. We were kind of leading off the point of making sure that we're keeping all of our variables the same. And we're really just focusing on increasing our weight within a specific rep range of anywhere from like 4 to 8 reps to hit maximum hypertrophy. And I think you wanted to clarify on one other factor.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about, really the most important part is that we're getting into that range of those involuntary slow reps. Okay, so when I say involuntary slow reps, I'm talking about the reps where you're pushing your hardest, okay, but the weight is moving slow on its own. Okay, so those reps where you're pushing your hardest, but the weight is moving slow, those are the reps that are going to help us get those two factors that we talk about that help us achieve hypertrophy in the most effective way. Okay, so there's different things that we can do to facilitate an environment that allows us to achieve those reps. Okay, so let's say you have an idea like, hey, my coach told me that I'm going to be doing 8 reps, right? But you're not actually getting those stimulating reps. That's what they're called, right?
Yep.
You're not getting those reps that are involuntarily slow.
The ones
and
that
you
count.
Stop at 8 too early, you're leaving so much gains on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's why I like to program in very wide rep ranges because I like to give my clients a lot of autonomy. So sometimes I even program, hey, we're going to do anywhere between 4 and 10. And it's on you to get close to failure and to make sure that you beat your past self. Because I care less about, hey, you need to do this exact rep.
Yep.
I care more about, hey, are you achieving the high recruitment and the high mechanical tension by achieving those gritty reps that we talk about.
So making sure that once again, another variable is making sure that your intensity stays the same from week to week, and that intensity needs to be very high.
Yes.
And it needs to be very close to failure.
Yeah.
Right. And we like to talk about like you're hitting failure. You're either hitting failure or maybe saving 1 in the tank.
Yeah.
Right. You should not be saving 2 or 3 or 4. Right. Like if you physically could battle your way to 2 more reps, you need to do more. Right. Like you should be 1 away from failure or on failure for your working sets.
And that's why I love machines. Okay, because when you're on a machine, it feels so much more comfortable to be able to take yourself to that point where you're only leaving 1 in the tank, or you're actually going all the way to failure. Whereas if I'm doing a barbell back squat, it's not going to feel comfortable at all to get to that point where, you know what I mean? It's actually, yeah.
Especially when you're working out alone.
Right.
If you don't have someone to spot you through with dumbbells and barbells to really reach failure, I would 100% agree with the machines.
So I think it's a really important point to clarify is that we're trying to, most importantly, when we're talking about efficient weight training, we're talking about getting the most return on your investment for everything you do. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about getting into that range where we're challenging ourselves, taking ourselves close to failure. And then I want to note, like, what we can do to best get in that range is by taking a lot of rest, choosing more stable movements. Okay, not training 6-7 days a week, and not just going in the gym and chasing the burn and doing the supersets and doing the drop sets. So there's a lot of things that we can do proactively with our programming to actually help us get those reps, right? Rather than just creating all this unnecessary damage and pain that's not actually going to help us improve and get to where we want to go.
So all leading back to one of the biggest mistakes is not having structure, and not having a sustainable approach, right?
Mhm.
So we have kind of covered, you know, that rep range and like progressive overload, hypertrophy, intensity, right? All those variables, frequency, volume. So frequency, volume, what are we looking for with those variables? We're keeping those the same, but what are we looking for those? So more specifically, let's just start with how many sets should I be doing per exercise? And is this including warm-ups? What do you mean by a working set? And what is a warm-up? So how many sets should I be doing per exercise?
Well, I'll answer the second part first, which
Yep.
is the working sets. Okay, so like when I'm programming, for example, I'm normally.
Should we hold up?
Yeah.
It's gonna be a while. It's fine. I don't think so.
It's better than that.
You're gonna clarify on what is a working set, how many sets should I be doing, and how many warm-up sets should I be doing, and what's the point of a warm-up set?
Yeah, so those sets to failure that we're talking about, or the sets that are close to failure, right? Those sets are tiring. They take a lot out of you. Okay, and this is the whole idea of the quality over quantity approach. Is we want to be able to make the most out of those. Okay, but we don't need to do tons of those. Okay, so really, like in any given workout, I'm usually for most exercises like doing 2 or 3 sets of those really intentional, close to failure, high effort, low velocity kinds of movements.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's hard to just go right into it from the jump. Okay.
Yep.
So like I would say the whole idea with like warm-up sets, at least for me, is I'm just doing pretty lightweight. Like I'm not doing anything that's actually gonna create any fatigue or limit my ability to perform on that first challenging set. So just whatever you can do to just kind of get your body acclimated to the movement.
Increase blood flow, warm up the muscles, make sure your form is absolutely perfect, make sure your
Yeah.
breathing is good. If you had to say something specific, just throw something out there. If I'm doing 100 pounds on my chest press, how much am I doing for my warm up?
Oh, I would say, I mean, for me, I'm probably doing one easy set of like 60 pounds.
Yep. I was gonna say around half,
Yeah,
maybe
like
a little
6
over
reps.
half.
It's nothing that is even close to failure or anything. It's just,
Yeah. So
like I
maybe
said,
around half, you know, give or take,
yeah.
what your working weight is, and you're gonna do that for how many warm up sets? 1, 2.
I'm usually doing one, just because. But I mean, just because at this point, like, I'm so confident in my ability to execute the movements that I feel really good just kind of going right for my record or getting right into that intensity range pretty early. But I would say it depends on the person and their comfort level. If they want a few more warm ups, as long as you're not pushing anything that's going to actually right like
Deplete your energy.
yeah deplete your
Don't
energy.
deplete your energy
Yeah.
during your warm ups. And what I like to say is, I agree. I like to do one. But I would say the higher the weight of the working set, like the higher the weight of the exercise, I'll maybe like to do 2 because I don't just want to hop into like heavy weight right away. So if I'm doing over 100 pounds or close to 200 pounds on something, then maybe I'll do 2 to work my way up to that weight. If I'm under 100 pounds on an exercise, I'm doing one warm up set. Would you agree on that somewhat?
Yeah, also with machines, I feel like it's a little bit different. Like when you're a power lifter, I know power lifters, they really require a lot of buildup just because there's so many moving parts with those movements. But like on a machine chest press, for example, which is what I'm programming and what I'm doing, it's a lot more comfortable to push in for the intense sets earlier.
Okay, so we've covered around 4 to 8 reps is good for hypertrophy. Around 3 working sets is a good spot to be at with a warm up or 2. How many exercises now am I doing per workout? So I'm doing 2 to 3 working sets. I'm doing 4 to 8 reps, but how many exercises should I be doing per workout?
So this is what we've touched on, but definitely like the training status, super important to answer that question. Because they're not going to be an exact definitive, this is the best number. If there was a number like that existed, like everyone would be doing it, right? But I think if you're a beginner, you can get away with doing a little bit more because you're still kind of learning the execution for different movements. You're still learning how to coordinate them properly. And when you're a beginner, it's a lot harder to get into that train to failure mode. Okay, I also would want to make note, like if you're a beginner, you don't need to think, oh, Jacob told me I need to train to failure, and I'm in here my first session in years, and I'm already going for those really intense reps. Like step one is you got to make sure you can actually do the movements properly.
Good form.
Yeah.
When we talk about intensity being high, it's intensity high with good form.
Yeah.
Good form is above intensity, right? Once you can master your form, then you can bring your intensity up. And I think your intensity progresses as your experience progresses, right? So a newbie is going to be kind of going through the motions somewhat at the beginning, right? Intermediate, okay, I'm increasing my intensity. Advanced, okay, maximum intensity,
Yeah.
right?
Just basically, the more advanced you are, the more you can make out of each set, right? You can get more bang for your buck with everything you do. So that means that less is required of you. Okay, so that's to answer your question of how many total exercises do I need. Like for me now, I'm usually not doing more than 4.
Yep.
Whereas when I was a beginner, I could probably get away with 6 to 8. Okay, and then intermediate probably somewhere in between. The more advanced you get, just knowing I can make more out of everything I do, and then when you want to start taking your volume down. So I would say if you're in that intermediate advanced territory and you've noticed yourself hitting a plateau, literally try taking your volume down, right, to somewhere like we're talking about, like 4 days a week, 4 movements, 2 to 3 challenging sets, and just watch how much your strength starts to skyrocket, and you'll actually see your muscles start blowing up like they did when you were a newbie. So it's a really cool experience. At least that's what happened for me, is when I started learning about these principles from my coach, started to see like new gains that I hadn't seen in years.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to almost repeat exactly what you just said. Kind of from my perspective, I just want to repeat it because it is controversial, and I do think that it's not talked about in the fitness community as much. Is a beginner lifter is going to do more volume because they're less intentional. An advanced lifter is going to do less volume because they're more intentional, right? Usually you think, oh, I need to do more sets, more reps, more, right? We talked about those variables that don't really matter as much. So I love what you said about how try out 4 days a week in the gym. Try out 4 exercises per workout. Try out 2 to 3 working sets per workout. That amount of volume with high intensity, intentional hypertrophy and progressive overload is what's going to give you the most gains, in my opinion. So that was really good. I just wanted to reiterate and touch on that again. I guess this leads into one of the last things when it comes to a variable, which is frequency. So, and we kind of touched on it, around 4 days a week. Do you think that's the sweet spot? Do you think 3 days is good? Do you think 5 days is good? Do you think, oh, I'm going to see the most gains if I go in every single day? Where do you stand on that? Like a weekly frequency basis?
So it would depend on a couple other factors: training status, how many exercises you're doing per workout. But if I had to plug and play, like, hey, I'm an advanced lifter, I'm doing what we talked about, which is like 4, maybe 5 movements if the 5th movement isn't super intensive, and I'm really making the most out of each one. I'm like right in that some weeks 4, some weeks 5 days kind of camp. If you're a beginner, and you're doing 3 full body workouts a week, you could probably make really good progress on that. Like I program some 3-day week programs, but generally I'm always between like 3 and 5 resistance training, hypertrophy workouts per week when I'm talking about training optimally, and that frequency is going to kind of change based on whether or not the person's a beginner, intermediate, advanced. And
so what you're saying is your program will be slightly different whether you go 3, 4, or 5 days, which is kind of the sweet spot, depending on your schedule, your goals, right? So making sure you determine what's best for you, how many days you can sustain in the gym, and making sure that your program fits the number of days that you're going, right? A 3-day program is going to be slightly different than a 5-day program. Once again, touching on like working with a professional, somebody that's knowledgeable on these things that can set you up for sustainability, structure, and a good routine is extremely important. I guess the last variable I want to touch on, man, we've touched on a lot and covered a lot of good stuff. So would be, how long should I be in the gym? Should I be in the gym 2-3 hours in order to get the best workout? Or should I be in the gym for 30 minutes and get it done as quick as possible? Where do you stand? Probably somewhere in the middle there.
I'll answer that question, but I want to really quickly touch on what you said about like with a professional. Okay, I wasn't just like all of a sudden a self-proclaimed master, like great at hypertrophy. Like, no, I was exactly where you're probably sitting right now, especially if your goal is to build muscle and doing all these things that we're talking about.
And still learning is what I would say. Always
Yes,
learning.
and still
Never
learning.
stop learning.
So,
We both have coaches. So,
Yeah.
like, we're still learning. We're not pros, but seeking professional guidance is important.
yeah, that's what I'm saying is just like the day I finally let myself put my pride aside and hire Chris Beardsley, who is like top of the line, world-class exercise physiologist, was like the day like it really started to break through for me. And I'm just trying to, I'm not nowhere close to him, but I'm just trying to harness everything that I've learned from him, and that's where this is coming from. So I just want you to, keep that in mind. But yeah, to answer your question about how much time I should be spending in the gym, if you really have a time constraint, for example, I would say like that's when you could probably get away with doing some of the intensifiers we talked about, like supersets to still make the most out of that time. But if you're like blank slate, hey, I just want to have a perfect program and I need to know how long I should be spending in the gym. For me, like with all the things that we talked about, like doing like 4 to 5 movements, 2 to 3 challenging sets for each one, that normally takes me like about an hour.
Which is so standard.
Yeah.
Right? About an hour. I would say I spend an hour 15, so about 75 minutes. But this includes like my warm up, like beforehand, rolling out, stretching, and then also hitting all of those sets. So, it seems standard. But yeah, I would say an hour in my opinion. Just one thing I wanted to touch on, and you can add anything if you think you'd like to, is I just see like the classic gym bro. He's in there 2 hours. He's in there 3 hours. He thinks like, oh, I'm going to outwork Jacob because he's only in there for an hour and I'm in here for 2 hours, right? So I think kind of getting rid of that stigma of the more time in the gym, which we've already touched on, does not equal more gains.
Yeah, that's probably the most important paradigm shift that somebody listening could like have for themselves. And it's such a liberating mindset change because when you realize like, wow, I can actually make more progress, but actually conserve some of my energy, be more intentional about how I spend my energy. That just translates to your life better. I love the gym now more than ever because I know like, hey, this isn't something that I have to hype myself up for and really push myself to my absolute limit and leave, hobbling. But hey, I can just beat my past self, really focus on doing movements that aren't freaking exhausting, like deadlifts and barbell squats, right? I can stick to movements that feel good. And as long as I'm progressing and getting stronger over time, I'm going to make more progress than I would otherwise. So
yeah, I want to touch on one thing that you just mentioned there that it's important is your workout routine does not revolve around deadlift, back squat, and bench press barbell. You could never touch a barbell again and still maximize your hypertrophy. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
And like we talk about this, if you're a power lifter, like
awesome.
A ton of respect for you, like, and that's your sport, is to do these really challenging, coordination demanding movements and be able to lift as much as you possibly can from point A to point B. And that is awesome. But most people, they're going to go in the gym and they're going to look around and they're going to see, hey, what is everybody else doing? And they're going to see a lot of those 3 movements. And I'm telling you, like, those movements are not going to feel good for a long time because they are a lot harder to execute. And I just found for me, like, how much more I love the gym when I stopped worrying about making it harder for myself and started thinking about, hey, how can I actually make it easier for myself with all the variables that I can control.
How can I optimize?
Yes.
Thanks for coming, Jacob. This is great.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
If you want to become an unstoppable hybrid athlete and live a happy and healthy lifestyle, hit the top link in the bio for one-on-one coaching. And that's all we got from you. Come back to this video, watch it over and over, take notes. Note takers are history makers. And let's get it done in the gym.